So there has been developing news today. I've seen it on Sky News in a link to Yahoo that former President George H.W. Bush has died at the age of 94. He was the oldest president in American history. I mean, the longest lived president, and he was the last one-term president to be in office. Now, it was only one term, but it was a very eventful term. And among those things that happened, of course, was the fall of the Berlin Wall, the collapse of communism in Eastern Europe, German reunification, and of course the First Gulf War, to name some of the prominent events. And of course, here in China, the Tiananmen crackdown. Um, there's a lot to say about any president. I don't think George H.W. Bush is going to go down as one of the very greatest American presidents. I think that's obvious. Nevertheless, I think he achieved quite a number of things that should be recognized. Now, I don't intend this video to be a kind of um, blind appraisal of his record. The Bush family, of course, has lots of controversies, to say the least. They are one of the most prominent and powerful American political dynasties ever. Um, and I think that with that, there is always going to be controversy. So George H.W. Bush was born in Milton, Massachusetts in 1924. I have a book by Stephen Grobard on the presidents, and he has each chapter, each president, a sort of nickname, which uh, or an acronym, pseudonym, shall we say, for each president that he feels is appropriate. And for Bush Sr., he has the Connecticut Yankee in disguise. Now, this is a reference to the fact that although both Bush presidents were born in the Northeast, they really became adopted sons of Texas, and they became really honorary Texans, and I think that was very important for them. We always associate the Bush family with Texas, but they were, of course, originally from the northeast coast. Um, and the patriarch of the Bush dynasty, of course, was Prescott Bush, but I think Bush Sr., George H.W. Bush, really became a patriarch in his own right as he established the political dynasty in Texas. The father of a president as well. He had a very accomplished life, there's no question about that. The youngest fighter pilot in World War II, then becoming the US ambassador to the UN under the Nixon administration. And then between 1974 and 1975, he became the envoy to China. Um, He then, of course, later became head of the CIA, which remains controversial with his later becoming president, and then served 2 terms as vice president under Ronald Reagan, which was an interesting arrangement because, of course, a bit like Hillary Clinton serving to Obama, Bush had lost to Ronald Reagan, but the two men later formed a good relationship. You had Reagan as a charismatic former actor, and Bush as a technocrat and businessman. I think it was a strong partnership. Um, in 1988, he defeated Michael Dukakis, of course, comfortably for the presidency, but then in 1992 lost to Bill Clinton. Now, I think that was a huge blow to the Bush family. Of course, there's always going to be a blow if you lose, a presidential bid. But I think that was particularly difficult because he had been a popular president. There hadn't been signs that he was going to lose. But I think the fact that he had a broken promise about not raising taxes, that was a big issue. But also, I think it's sort of like when Winston Churchill lost the British general election in 1945, there was a saying in Britain, people cheered for Churchill and voted for Labour. I think something similar happened in America on a different scale, um, in that Bush was popular, but it was a combination of that broken promise and also the fact that people were moving on now from the Gulf War, and perhaps Bush Senior relied a little bit on that victory to propel them into a second term, which of course didn't happen. Bill Clinton very cleverly utilized that. And I think in those early years there was some bitterness and hostility. But Later on, of course, the two men famously became close friends with the Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004. Bush Sr. and Clinton engaged in a lot of humanitarian work, and the Bush family joked that Bill Clinton was kind of the long lost son or the black sheep of the family. Um, he did have a remarkable life. At the age of 75, he began parachuting again, going right up to his 90th birthday, which is incredible, whatever way you look at it. Um, I don't think anyone could dispute that he had an accomplished life. He became a self-made millionaire, of course, one of the major Texas oil men. Um, he's always going to be controversial. I think any president's going to be controversial, particularly if your last name is Bush. And I'm not going to, exonerate any of that. I'm not going to say it's right or wrong. I'm aware of all the conspiracy theories around the Bush family, and I think there might be some justification for some of them. Regarding the first Gulf War, I happen to think it was the right thing to do. Why? Because Saddam was the aggressor. They invaded, the Iraqi regime invaded a sovereign state in Kuwait, and President Bush's actions were liberating that country. And with that, he formed a strong relationship with Britain's John Major and others. It was less controversial in the Second Gulf War because, in that case, it was Iraq invading Kuwait, whereas the Second Gulf War, the aggression did come from the coalition. So, um, although it has to be said that Saddam violated the UN resolutions. Now, the both Iraq wars are always going to be controversial. That's never going to change. There's always going to be very strong opinions about that, and with that, President Bush's legacy. Like I say, I'm not trying to exonerate him of anything, but I happen to believe that that first Gulf War, at least, was justified. Um, what else can be said? I think he had a different personality to his son. He was more soft spoken, less evangelist. The two men had a somewhat different personality. Oliver Stone's film W perhaps exaggerated the tensions between father and son, because certainly the public face that I've seen is that both men are staunchly supportive of each other. So perhaps Oliver Stone exaggerated some of the family dynamics that were going on. But the Bush family is always going to hold public interest, I think, because they have been one of the most prominent dynasties in American history. Two presidents, two governors, senators. Um, they've made their mark on American history. And I think there's going to be a state funeral, of course. So there's going to be a lot of commentary over this. George H.W. Bush, 1924 to 2018.